Sometimes GuitarTab can not only tell you just which notes to play, but also how to play them. And Tab uses special notation to indicate this. In this video, we're going to go over what this notation is so you can read and play some of your favorite songs. Welcome to part 2 of Reading Tab for Beginners. If you need to go back to part 1, please click the link in the card above on the screen here or down below in the description. One important note before we start. I've included some common versions of this notation in this video that I have run across while playing guitar, but Tab is the people's tool, and so people may get somewhat creative with how they notate certain things in Tab, and you may run across versions of these that look different from what we're going to discuss today. So you just want to make sure that you familiarize yourself with these techniques. And sometimes Tab will actually have a legend or a key that shows you what people mean by certain symbols. Also, I'm using the word pluck to mean any method of striking a string in order to sound a note, whether that's through using your pick or your fingers or any other method. Okay, so our first technique is the bend. Bending is when you physically bend a string up or down, the effect is the same, in order to change the pitch of a note. Usually in Tab, you'll see that on top of the arrow in a bend, there is a small number like a half or one or full or 1.5, and that indicates the number of steps you're going to be moving the note up. And it's always up. That's going to tell you how many basically frets you want to move your original note up when you bend it. So a good technique here is to make sure that you know what the target note should sound like when you're going to bend a note, so that you know what it's supposed to sound like when you do the technique. Next is bend and release. In this, you bend the note, but then you also return back to its original position and sound that note. So you're getting 2 notes out of it. Next is pre-bend. With pre-bend, you bend the note up to the target note before you strike it, and once it's there, then you strike the note, you sound the note, and often it'll actually be included in a pre-bend and release, where you're going to sound the pre-bend and then also go back to your original note. Next is vibrato. Vibrato is one of the most common techniques you're going to use while playing guitar. It's basically changing the pitch of a note very subtly and very quickly in order to sustain the sound of the note. Think of vibrato as a quick series of mini bends. Next is sliding up to a note. Sometimes in Tab, you'll see that it specifies which note to start on and which one to end on, and sometimes it'll just tell you which note to slide up to, which one to end on, and you have to choose an appropriate place on the neck as your starting position, one that sounds good and appropriate for the song. Next is sliding down to a note, and the same principles apply here. Then we have the ever-popular hammer-on. Hammer-ons are achieved by snapping your finger down onto a note, and that's how you sound it, rather than by striking it with your strumming hand. The sibling to the hammer-on is the pull-off. This is where you have your fingers on 2 separate notes and on the same string, and you strike the note that is higher up on the neck, then you remove that finger, and the second note that's the lower on the neck is the one that you'll hear after that. So when you put a succession of hammer-ons and pull-offs together, you create that effect that we all know and love, the hammer-on and pull-off, which is basically a trill sound. Next is harmonics. This is when you take your fretting finger and you just barely, very lightly touch a string right directly above the fret wire, and you pluck that note, and what you get is like a light, airy, ethereal tone that will ring out and sustain for a long time. What you're doing here is removing what's called the fundamental of the note, or like the meat of the note, and leaving behind this harmonic that you've created. Harmonics are created by shortening the length of the vibrating string that you're working on, and you're doing it by fractions like a half, a third, or a quarter. A lot of physics involved here that I cannot even get into. Related to this is a pinch harmonic, which is created by fully fretting a string. And when you pick that note with your pick, you just very gently, barely touch that string with a finger on your strumming hand right after picking it with your pick. And that creates like a squeal or a squelch sound. So it's a version of a harmonic that has this kind of nasty kind of crunch to it. Next is muted notes. This is when you fully strum or pluck strings, but with your fretting hand, you just barely touch them so that they aren't actually creating any kind of note. This is when you want to do like a percussive sound in a song, like when people do like a chug-chug portion of a song. You can also mute a note when you want to strum in one single movement, a dyad or a chord, but maybe there's a string that's in the middle of this strum that you don't want to sound in any way, so you need to silence it. So let's say you have a dyad, you want to play something on the 5th string and the 3rd string, but that 4th string is getting in the way. So you basically will fret the 5th and 3rd strings, and then you just slightly touch that 4th string so that it makes no sound. And then when you strum it, all you're hearing is those 2 notes on the 5 and the 3. And finally, we've got palm muting, which is a technique that allows you to really sort of heartily strum a chord and do something where you can, in rapid succession, allow this chord to ring out and then to also be silent or muted or have the chug-chug effect in rapid succession back and forth. And on this one, you're actually using the heel of your palm as you are strumming the chord to dampen it and make it not have any melody to it. And then you're lifting your palm on the next downstrokes or upstrokes to sound the chord, and you go back and forth like that. It's used a lot in funk and other kinds of genres that have this sort of fast succession of strumming. Okay, so those are all the techniques I wanted to cover today with these tab notations. I didn't get into some of the advanced stuff like tapping or dive bombing or pick scrapes, because I think for now these are the right amount of techniques that we cover today for people who are beginners at reading tab and using them to play their favorite songs. Again though, you may run across other types of notation in tab that you would like to discuss, and if so, please put it down in the comments and we can go over those together. As always, thank you so much again for joining us on Strange Device, and we will see you in the next video.